What is up, everybody? Mr. Curtis here. Welcome to Unit 3.2. We're looking at the Industrial Revolution in this entire unit. If you don't remember what the Industrial Revolution is, it is the shift from farming to factory work or working outside of a farm area. So pre-industrial revolution in Great Britain, we have about 97% of the population is farming. And we're going to see a huge flip of that by the end of this time period. And today, like we talked about, you probably don't know a whole lot of people who are farming for a living in the United States. So this is the technology. There's a lot of changes that result from the Industrial Revolution. We're going to kind of chunk them into different groups or different categories. So here's the deal with technology. First thing, and we kind of talked about this already in the last video and talked about it a little bit in class, we have this new thing called a factory and the factory system. Essentially, if you don't know what a factory is, which I'm sure you all do, but let's pretend that you don't, is a building or a structure, usually a couple stories high. And within that building, people are making something. It could be one specific product, like a car, for example, which we're going to see by the end of this period of around 1900, or it could be something like a shirt. So for example, this shirt that I have on, if this was made in a factory. So if this was during this period of the late 1700s, 1800s, each person in that factory would have a specialized job. So this is the term that we're looking at, specialization of labor. To be specialized is to know one thing really well, and labor means work. So in this case, we're talking with this shirt here, one person's job would be to stitch this sleeve right here. So I don't know, right there, boom. So just to stitch a sleeve. So someone would pass the shirt down to them and they would stitch on the sleeve, and then they pass it to the next person who might do a different piece of it. They might stitch on both sleeves. The next person might stitch on the zipper here. The person after might stitch on the bottom. Everybody has a different job. So instead of making just the entire shirt by yourself and doing all of this, you do one thing. And it's almost this assembly line production that we're going to see, which you might have heard about in US history in 8th grade, where, for example, in the Ford plant in Michigan, each person in that plant would have one specific job, and the assembly line would keep moving. So you have whatever 100 people each doing their own job. So it makes it faster. It makes it quicker. You don't have to be an expert on everything. You just have to be an expert on one simple thing. For example, this stitching right here, maybe, and it makes everything quicker, faster, and quicker and faster products usually leads to worse quality, but it also leads to a lower price so more people can afford it. Number two. So first thing is factory systems. Second thing is better communication and transportation. We're going to see a whole bunch of inventions that shrink the world. And really the biggest invention that comes out of this, and again, we talked a little bit about this in class, is the invention of taking coal, heating up that coal, and powering an engine. So as a result of this new technology, we're going to see steamships and railroads as a result of this steam engine. And these two things are going to make it easier to travel and to interact with people. And if it's easier to travel and interact with people, we're going to see the exchange of ideas and diseases and a whole bunch of other stuff. But for example, if you wanted to travel from Britain to the United States or the 13 colonies in the 1600s, it would have taken you a couple weeks to do because you're taking a sailboat or a boat with sails on it. Now with the steamship, you can make that same journey in 3 days. So we're going to see the world essentially, I like to say, shrink because more people can travel and interact. Not much different than today with airplanes and the continued improvement of airplanes. And eventually they're going to try and make it so you can take a flight from England to the United States in an hour, which would totally make it easier to travel, make it easier for business, blah, blah, blah. Also, we have the telegraph. The telegraph is kind of the OG or the originator of what essentially we're going to have, which is the original kind of phones. So you can use this to send messages across the Atlantic Ocean, and then it's instant communication. So it travels through a wire, and then on the other end, someone in England, if you're in the United States, can receive your message instantaneously. Much better for communication. Instead of sending a letter across on a sailboat that's going to take a month to get, now we can instantaneously communicate back and forth and make decisions. So this is just a picture of telegraph lines right here. If you want to know what it looked like, very, very densely populated. These are the telegraph lines. So they have them along the ocean floor, which is kind of cool. Not much different than our internet cables today. We have internet cables that are on the ocean floor or under the water. And then these are just railroad lines in England or in Europe. And the more railroad lines you have, the more industrialized the country. You can see Britain right here. If you don't know your Britain geography from the last one, it's right there. And this is Italy. Just a little fun fact. Two other things. One, new sources of energy. We're going to see more what are called fossil fuels. Fuels are ways to dig into the earth and get resources that can power things. Coal is going to be a big one at the start of this period, and eventually we're going to shift to oil by the 1900s. which is the main source of energy today. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about fossil fuels, and they could go out, and then we need to go to more alternative energy fuels. But back in this period, we're really harvesting and using fossil fuels as much as possible. So we're also going to see the invention of electricity in the late 1800s, which is hugely transformative, hence the reason why we are here and there's lights on and all this other good stuff. So communication, we have new sources of energy, we have the factory system, and then last but not least, we have new technologies that increase what are called the standard of living. Things that aren't necessarily like you have to have, but things that are like really good to make your life a whole heck of a lot easier. What we call it is standard of living. So it's like a standard of what you expect. So here in the United States, you have a certain standard of what you expect in an apartment or a house or wherever you're living. You expect running water that's clean. You expect a stove. You expect electricity, all those things. If you go back to 1750, those weren't standards that people expected. So we have these inventions of new things. We're going to eventually, by the end of this period, see the telephone. This is for a stovetop, the invention of toilet paper. What do you do before toilet paper? Another story for another time. We got washing machines that are going to be invented. This is like an OG washing machine right here. We also have the invention of toilets, both public toilets, which are going to be the original toilets where you're walking down the street and you have to go. There's a public toilet that you can pay for. Eventually, we're going to shift to running water and toilets in a home as opposed to just using wells all the time and using outhouses. And the original toilet, one of the most popular toilets in England at the time, was invented by a guy named John Crapper. So Crapper's toilets were super famous, hence the name of that word. Fun fact of the day. So all of these things are going to improve medicine. They're going to improve household life, more free time as a result of doing these things instead of having to wash clothes by hand, better sanitation, longer living. All those good things are going to come about. Those are the big pieces of the technology. A lot of good stuff coming out of here. All these inventions have mainly positive that we talked about today. We'll eventually get to some more negative stuff in the next video. That's all I got. You got any questions, you let me know. I'm out, I think. Now I'm out.